Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to come back and talk some more on Larry the Law Guy on the Facebook page. And I apologize because it's been a week or more since we've had a chance to share any information. And I think a lot of it is because we understand that we talked about the pandemic for the last few sessions because it was the most important thing happening. But I think now there's been a shift in our country's concerns and what is really important for us to grasp and understand. So I want to talk about it, and I want to talk about it in terms of what we know that's going on, what has happened. And we know that in Boston right now, there's been destruction of property by American citizens. They've destroyed the property of others, and they are marching in the streets of Boston, and the government is there, and the government soldiers are there, and the citizens of the of America, the American citizens are speaking out, and they're protesting what they believe is oppression by the government, and they are expressing themselves, and they're expressing themselves with their voices, and they're expressing themselves by having done the things that they did with the property that they destroyed. And the government and the soldiers are shooting Americans, and the Americans that they're shooting begin to fight back. And in fact, we know that's happened, and it's not happening today, but that's what happened in 1773 in Boston, Massachusetts. The Americans, us, we determined that we were tired of the oppression of the government, England, and we protested. And we protested with our voices, but we also protested when we went to the harbor and we destroyed the tea that we believe was an expression of the oppression of the British government over America. We have historically been a country of individuals who believed that it was right to protest what we believe were oppressions, what we believe were wrong, that were being committed to us. And we are the Americans, the same Americans, 300 plus years, 250 plus years, whatever number of years later, that continue to want our voices heard at times that we believe our freedoms are being impinged upon. And I think that's important to think about now and to know. And there's a lot of discussion about what is righteous when it comes to protest, what is wrong when it comes to protest. But I think it's important for us to talk a little bit about what happened after we stood up against the British and we became that independent United States of America, and we adopted a constitution. And I think it's important to know what the Constitution says as it relates to the right of free speech. We hear people banner that around all different ways and describe it the way that they want it to fit. But I'm going to just read the Constitution because those are the words that were written down, and I wrote them so I could look down at my own handwriting. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. It was important for our forefathers because they left England because of the lack of the English government's foresight to see that it's important to let people have freedom to decide how they wanted to worship. Our forefathers knew it was important to keep the government they were creating from having the ability to dictate what our religion should be as our individual desires. The government shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech. The government shall make no law that prohibits you from speaking freely, that prohibits you from standing up against the oppression of the King of England when it comes to the issues surrounding the stamp tax, the tea tax, and every other thing that our forefathers in 1773 felt were wrong, that we, our ancestors, stood up and protested against and engaged in what we would consider today activities that were criminal, destroying the property of the British Tea Company. And we did that. Also, the government shall not enact laws to abridge the freedom of the press. The independent agencies that give us the news, Fox, CNN, MSNBC, they are all allowed. BuzzFeed, everybody is allowed to express in the press what their belief is that the events happening around them mean. And the government can't stop us from doing those things. We have the right to peaceably assemble. And that becomes the question right now. Are the assemblies that are happening peaceable? You have folks who say, oh, well, at some point in time they are peaceable, but then they go to the next level. Therefore, the Constitution doesn't cover their right to assemble. I will submit to you that engaging in criminal conduct is not acceptable for any lawyer. I will submit to you, when you look at the events surrounding things that have occurred, there are moments that peaceable assembly has lost its peacefulness. But there are also moments that that peacefulness is shoved out the door by actions of others who are not a part of the peaceful assembly. We have to deal with those things. We have to deal with those things in the context of protecting the Constitution, protecting all of our constitutional rights, allowing and continue to allow Americans the right to do the things that they did that gave us the opportunity to become the great country we are. But for our courage, our forefathers' courage to stand up, to protest, to do what they felt was necessary to get England to get their boot off of our throat so we could breathe in this country as a free country, to have free press, to have free assembly, to have free religion. We did what we had to do. And we also have the right to petition the government for our grievances. That means we have an absolute right to express to our government what it is that we believe is wrong, our grievances. This is what the Constitution says about religion, about speech, about grievances, and about the press. And those things that came about in the Bill of Rights in 1789 developed over the course of time of our American forefathers understanding what had happened when they were oppressed, when England chose what it was they were allowed to do and treated them as second-class citizens to the crown. And then our American government, Thomas Jefferson, the brilliant men of the time, decided we will make it clear for all generations that you have these rights, because those are the rights that were used by them to mold and shape the great nation we are. Now, one of the other things that's important to understand and know, the Constitution provides that the government shall never be able to force citizens to quarter soldiers in their homes. That amendment is an expression of an understanding that the military of our government should not be used in a way that the citizens are forced to support them by placing them in their homes, because that's what the English were doing to us. We have the right to bear arms and having a militia because that's what the English were doing to us. They were taking our arms, they were prohibiting us from having militia to protect ourselves, and they were making us have English soldiers, British soldiers, live in our homes, be in our homes, because they felt like they needed to have them there to control the American people. The Constitution is written to foster protest by Americans who were oppressed by the English. The Constitution was written to give us the ability to have those rights that were so essential and important to us to develop into the great nation we are. And we are a great nation, and we will continue to be a great nation so long as we understand and come together and remember, we are not fighting one another. We are one country. We were one country that came together because of the oppressions of others. We have to find a way, we have to find our path, and we have to find that path soon to come back together. And it's not with threats of violence against one another. It's not with threats of marching the military down our streets. It's not with threats of differences and pointing fingers at black, white, brown, purple, green, Catholic, Jewish, Protestant, Episcopalian, or Pentecostal. Our Constitution was written in a way that we should be able to understand that America's greatness is based upon our ability to embrace all those things. We have to do it now, and I believe it's important for us to know what the Constitution says and means. Now, I apologize if I've gotten off on more of a philosophical, personal rant than you care to hear, but under the conditions we are living in right now, I believe it was important. I believe it's essential. I believe it's understandable for all of us to be afraid, but I think we have to hearken back to the fact we are one nation. We are all one nation of immigrants. We are all one nation of individuals who have been oppressed, were oppressed, and this nation rose from a desire to stand up to the oppression that we felt like we were being subjected to, and we made it a great nation, and we became the greatest country in the world. I thank each and every one of you, and I hope to be back talking later about things that aren't quite as emotional and aren't quite as impacting on our day-to-day lives and safety. Thank you.